there could be up to 21 parties on the regional list ballot paper in next year's Scottish election. That's a lot of parties to consider, so I'm here to help you with my 2021 Scottish election party guide. Now, you're probably thinking he's going to be really biased, but I can assure you that is absolutely not the case. What I'm going to offer here is a neutral, unbiased, objective guide to enable you to weigh up the options and to decide for yourself to vote for the Scottish Family Party. So, off we go then. Scottish Socialist Party, what do they offer? They offer proper Venezuela economic disaster style socialism. Look at their website. The bogeyman for them is billionaires and bosses. They're the people to blame for pretty well everything. I mean, almost some of it sounds like stirring up hatred against these people. The best line I found on their website was this: they oppose illegal and unjust wars from Tony Blair to Donald Trump. Which is a bit ironic, since Donald Trump's about the only president of the United States for an awful long time who didn't start any wars. But anyway, that's the Scottish Socialist Party, which split a while ago into the Scottish Socialist Party and a party called Solidarity, which is a similar, very hard left party, the party of Tommy Sheridan. Now, I'm using the word party very loosely because I can't actually see any evidence that it does actually exist as a political party. And Tommy Sheridan's message seems to be to vote for another party next year. So I'm not sure if they're going to have candidates, but the Solidarity Party still exists. Right, staying on the hard left, we then come to the Greens. Now, to be honest, the Greens have got the extreme left wing sewn up. It tends to be in Britain, when people think of the political spectrum, it goes from the far right or the hard right, and then at the other end, you never hear people talking about the hard left or the far left, because it's got a different name. They're called the Greens instead. Now, you'll be familiar with the Green Party in Scotland, but if they were in government, bye-bye an awful lot of our freedoms. If they were in power for 10 years, I think I'd be in prison by the end of that. And that's not just a dramatic thing to say. I genuinely think that's what would happen. Green Party's leader, Patrick Harvey, I've spoken to him on several occasions in a friendly manner when I've done debates or whatever with him. I'm yet to have a single word in reply, but maybe one day he will deign to speak to me. Anyway, so that's the Greens. You're familiar with them. Scottish Labour Party. What are they like? Well, you know what the Labour Party is like. In Scotland, I feel that it's a little bit weak, a little bit dull. Richard Leonard, I remember watching him once in First Minister's Question Time. Other times as well. He asked questions like, 93-year-old Agnes Mackay in my constituency. She's been waiting 7 months for such and such an operation. What have you got to say to that? Nicola Sturgeon replies, well, first of all, I'd like to say I'm very concerned for Agnes and I encourage her to get in touch with me, but the waiting times are this, that and the other. You listen to him and think, well, in a sense, it's good you're concerned for these people. That's a good thing for an MSP to be bringing up these issues in the Parliament. But as party leader, that doesn't really cut it. It doesn't really make an impact on the national stage. Anyway, you're familiar with the Labour Party. Now, there's also a party called the SNP, the Scottish National Party. They're a party of anti-nationalists. Now, a lot of the supporters are nationalists. For some of their supporters, voting SNP is akin to supporting the Scottish football team. To a lot of their supporters, it is based on a sense of Scottish national identity. But the SNP themselves and their policies are actually internationalists. It seems more that they want to leave the UK in order to escape from British national identity rather than embodying Scottish national identity as a positive thing. They want to dissolve Scotland into the EU soup. Anyway, other things about the SNP, you don't need me to go into those. I mean, there are lots of problems to talk about. Right, the Lib Dems. They're a bit like the SNPs, only they're unionist. And the other defining factor about the Lib Dems is they always seem such nice people, which is great. But on the other hand, sometimes they seem to maybe lack the cutting edge as well in the debating chamber. Right, staying with some centrist parties. There's also the SDP, Social Democratic Party. Remember, there used to be the SDP and there was the Liberal Party. They merged to make the Lib Dems. But as often happens with a merger, you start with two, they merge to make a new one, and you end up with three. Because some of this group doesn't want to join the new one, some of this group doesn't want to join the merger, so they carry on. So the SDP carried on in the background, but it came to life a little bit more recently. A lot of the activists in it were refugees from UKIP in Scotland. But it's now a sort of centrist, anti-woke, anti-social justice party. And one of their defining features was being pro-Brexit. I thought I would say probably that was the defining feature of the party not too long ago. But now that's water under the bridge, so I think they've lost that crucial defining feature. The SDP's maybe most prominent supporter in Scotland would be David Robertson, the Christian Free Church minister, blogger. He came out saying he was a member and supporter. I don't know if he still is. I assume he still is, which I found quite interesting, because David Robertson would talk about abortion in the sternest terms as an absolute moral abomination, a real catastrophe. And yet when it came to picking a party to support, he expressed his support for a party that's quite happy with this moral catastrophe continuing, which I found quite confusing. David Robertson's usually up for a debate. If he wants to come and debate that on the live stream, I'd be more than happy to discuss it. Right, moving on through our party list, the Conservatives. You know about the Conservative Party in Scotland, mushy and unprincipled. And you've always got to remember the Conservatives. If you hear one of them talking sense, always remember there's probably another one saying exactly the opposite thing to someone else in a different context. And often the Conservatives come in making sort of vaguely the right noises, but it's too little and too late. I mean, a few months ago, Murdo Fraser, the Conservative MSP, he came out and wrote an article about the trans issue, saying that he was concerned about some aspects. It was quite a timid and limited article in some ways, but what he said was right, and I agreed with him. But it reminded me of, if you think about D-Day, the first wave arrives, they go storming up the beach, half of them get shot, they fight their way into the fortresses and manage to capture some of the Germans, and eventually they've managed to win the beachhead. Then the second wave comes along, and that's maybe got a couple of Scottish Conservatives in, who will get out of the landing craft and say, right, we need to get up this beach and attack those fortresses at the top, when people have already taken the risks and fought the battle in front of them. Anyway, Scottish Conservatives, you're familiar with them. Right, continuing along the political spectrum. UKIP, UK-wide and in Scotland, has been riven by schism for years. For some reason or other, I'm sure psychologists have got explanations, parties on this side of the political spectrum tend to attract people who basically are either impossible to work with or just can't work with each other. You get sort of ego problems, people stabbing each other in the back constantly. So that's happened in UKIP at all sorts of levels. A few years ago, UKIP took a turn in very much the anti-Islam direction, but it's turned away from that a bit now. But in Scotland, from what I can tell, there's virtually nothing left of it. The Edinburgh branch is closed, the Glasgow branch is closed. Virtually everyone I know who used to be involved in UKIP isn't anymore. But their secret weapon for the Scottish election is the policy of abolishing the Scottish Parliament. And I'd imagine on the ballot paper they were thinking of having something like UKIP, abolish the Scottish Parliament. And I think that might have been quite effective. But, coming on to our next party, the Abolish the Scottish Parliament Party. Now this is founded by some people I understand who come out of UKIP as well. And I've heard, I don't know how right this will be, I've heard almost sort of out of spite, they decided to take UKIP's tagline and steal it. So UKIP won't be able to put abolish the Scottish Parliament or abolish Holyrood on the ballot paper because this party has got it as its name. So how will they do? Will they get many votes for that message, abolish Holyrood? I think they might get quite a few. People are just in the, get rid of a lot of them, that'll sort it out. So, maybe quite a few people will want to vote like that. Some people think it's the way to kill off nationalism. I think the opposite. Abolishing the Scottish Parliament will be the way to inflame nationalism to a point where I would really worry about the consequences of that. But obviously UKIP and Abolish the Scottish Parliament Party are going to be splitting each other's vote. Right, moving on, another UKIP splinter group for Britain. They exist in Scotland, very small as far as I know. A big focus of theirs is anti-Islam. Now, by anti-Islam, I don't mean anti-Muslims. I mean concerns about Islam, which you may or may not agree with. But how relevant are they to Scotland? Is it a good idea for a party to make that its leading issue, a really central issue, going into a Scottish election? I'm not sure it really is. But I'm not sure they're going to appear on the ballot paper, but they might. Right, the Scottish Libertarian Party. They'll appear on the ballot paper, at least in some areas of Scotland. I'm pretty confident with that. But the lockdown's been a great issue for them because they've got a ready-made response to that. They're libertarians, so they'll be against lockdowns. But maybe people don't realise sometimes just how right-wing the Libertarians are. When people think of right-wing, they tend to think of it going into like racism or whatever at the extreme. But looking at the Libertarian thing, they, for example, would want to abolish the NHS in its current form of funding, which is a pretty radical policy in Britain. They basically would like to abolish the welfare state and state education, and they're also in favour of Scottish independence. I think with the Libertarians, they're very much driven by their theory that liberty and freedom are good, and people will sort things out for themselves, the market will take care of it. Now, I would say it's better to take a more case-by-case approach, and so on this issue, it seems like an open market solution could be very helpful, but whereas on this issue, maybe the government's taking more of a role is going to be better. Whereas Libertarians, it tends to be a one track, that you've always got to get the government out of it and leave it up to free markets and free individuals. Anyway, that's the Libertarians. Right, moving on. The Independent Scotland Party. This is a new party, and their philosophy is that in the Scottish election, you get two votes. The first vote for the constituency, second vote on the regional list. And what happens with the SNP is, in recent years, they've won virtually all the constituencies, which means, via a complicated process, that they end up getting virtually no MSPs with the list vote, even though they get a lot of votes. So some independence campaigners have thought through, quite rightly, that actually the way to get more independents supporting MSPs in the Parliament is to vote for a different independence party, supporting party, on the list. Now, to be honest, I don't think this is a new thought, and I think that's why the Greens do relatively well. It's because it's independent supporters wanting to get more independence backers in the Parliament. It's not because they think the Greens are preferable to the SNP. Right, so this strategy, to take this strategy so explicitly, does that amount to cheating? Well, that's a bit of an open question. I think ultimately it doesn't. The problem is with the system. The system allows itself to be played, and I think the system should be changed to prevent this. I think if the SNP were to say, don't vote for us with your second vote, vote for the Independent Scotland Party, then I think the Electoral Commission would say, no, this is not on, this is not a separate party, and they would ban the Independent Scotland Party. So it's quite interesting. Now, I spoke to someone, or communicated with someone involved in the Independent Scotland Party while it was being set up. And they said, basically the idea is just to get people supporting independence. But also it was going to be a little bit socially conservative. It would, just back off from some of the SNP's more extreme, so woke agenda. But looking at them now that they exist, that's not the case at all. I mean, the only policy they have like that is they oppose the Gender Recognition Act. But apart from that, that's it. They're totally on board with the sort of liberal, progressive, secular direction that the SNP is going in. The other thing I'd say with the Independent Scotland Party, their approach to independence, I would say, is very hard line and is going to inflame the independence movement considerably and to increase impatience and frustration in it, again with unpredictable consequences, I would say. Right, that's the Independent Scotland Party. Right, we next come to its duplicate, another party with virtually exactly the same philosophy, just to maximise the independence vote on the regional list, and that's called Action for Independence. They've already fallen out with the Independent Scotland Party, which is really crazy because they're virtually identical, but they're going to split each other's votes. Now, the Action for Independence Party was founded by Nigel Donn, who was a former SNP MSP. He was a Christian, actually, opposed same-sex marriage, and then he got deselected after them. Now, I thought it looked like maybe he'd been deselected because of his unfashionable opinions. I've heard that that wasn't actually the case. There were other issues as well, but whatever. So that's the Action for Independence Party. I've had a look at it online, and to be honest, it looks an absolute shambles. I mean, I couldn't find a website. The Facebook page was all over the place. But anyway, so you've got two parties there doing exactly the same thing. They're just going to split each other's votes, and I would imagine that will result in neither of them achieving anything, apart from taking votes off the SNP, which you might regard as an achievement, depending on your perspective. Right, continuing with parties that are just obsessed with the Constitution, we've got the Alliance for Unity. Now, with the Alliance for Unity, question one is, alliance, who is it an alliance with? And the answer is, well, no one. The idea was to approach the other parties and see if they could do some sort of deal. But the other parties inevitably, obviously, have rejected that idea. Now, this party is led by George Galloway, who I would say is a pretty hard left figure in the Jeremy Corbyn mould, very, very anti-Israel. If you look at his Wikipedia page, you can see he's quite a colourful character, all sorts of incidents in his past. But as far as I can see, they've basically got one policy. And the one policy is defend the union. Now, as far as I can tell, all the people I come across who say they like the Alliance for Unity or they're going to support it, they're going to vote for it, they're real right-wingers. So it's quite strange that a very hard left-winger seems to be gathering the support of only right-wingers. So the Alliance for Unity, that's them. But their vote now, I think, is very definitely going to be split with the Reform Party, which until a couple of weeks ago was the Brexit Party. Now, I think Brexit had a massive polarisation effect in Britain. So people would think, I'm a Brexiteer, I'm a Remainer. So if they saw on the ballot paper the Brexit Party, I think a lot of people, even now, would still think, oh, Brexit, that's me, I'll vote for them, I'm a Brexit person, that's for me. But it's really water under the bridge. But they've changed their name to the Reform Party, and Michelle Ballantyne, the Conservative MSP, ex-Conservative MSP, has joined them as their leader, so they've now got one MSP. Michelle Ballantyne, by the way, if you didn't know, is a very enthusiastic campaigner in favour of assisted suicide. So what are the policies of the Reform Party? Well, they're anti-lockdown, very definitely. But by the time of the Scottish election, will that still be an issue? Won't that be fading away? I think it might well be. They're pro-union. Okay, nothing very unique about that. If you look at their website, there's a facility for them to take your money. There's a facility for you to apply to be a candidate, but there are no policies. But you can imagine what they're going to be like. They'll be a bit sort of anti-woke, but they won't be, as the Family Party is, for example, pro-family, pro-marriage, pro-life. Not a bit of it. None of that at all. But they'll be a populist party. That's the Reform Party. Very similar to the Reform Party, which I would imagine might have candidates in Scotland as well, is Lawrence Fox's Reclaim Party. Lawrence Fox, the actor, who's become a bit of a political commentator as well. Apparently he's received a £5 million donation to launch this party UK-wide. At the moment, it has no policies. It's been in action for months. It's funny, when we started the Family Party, we spent months working policies out. Then we launched. These other parties seem to do it the other way around. They launch with nothing but a name and then work out what they stand for afterwards. But anyway, I think the Reclaim Party, it's going to be sort of anti-woke, pro-free speech. So things that we would basically agree with, but we've got a much broader positive agenda as well. Things that are going to make a positive difference in society instead of just stopping some of the negative things. So that's the Reclaim Party. Right, who do we come to next? The Christian Party. Now, the Christian Party in Scotland, I would say, is very much a right-wing party. I mean, their tax policy is for very, very dramatic tax cuts. Government spending would have to be absolutely slashed on that basis. Now, our issue with the Christian Party was then, if you call yourself a Christian party, you narrow your potential support very significantly, and it's not the way to enter into politics. We don't want politics to be the Christian party versus the Muslim party versus the atheist party. Politics should be about policies. Now, the advantage the Christian party's got is people can walk into that polling booth, having never heard of them, see the word Christian and think, oh yeah, I'm a Christian, they're probably roughly on my wavelength, I'll vote for them. So that's an advantage in the short term, but in the longer term, it's a real limitation. Whereas with the Family Party, we've got more of a challenge. We need to let people know what we're about. People won't get that just from seeing our name. But in the longer term, when people understand what we're about, we can have a much broader appeal. So the Christian Party, are they pro-family, pro-marriage, pro-life? To a large extent, yes. Pro-life, definitely. The other ones, I would say our policies are fuller on those. But yeah, roughly speaking, they're supporting similar sort of things. So the Christian Party, they've got some good ingredients, but they're part of the wrong recipe, and it's in the wrong package. And the other issue is, in terms of activists and activity, is there any? Is there much at all? Well, the UK Christian Party last tweeted in July. The Scottish Christian Party Facebook page puts something up about once every couple of months. Now, I've been talking about parties splitting the vote with each other. I mean, to be honest, if the Scottish Christian Party stands, I'm not sure they will. I'm not sure they'll have many candidates at all. But where they do stand, they might be splitting the vote a little bit with us. Right, next party, you probably hadn't heard of this one. The Saving Scotland Party. You can see a banner here from a recent one of their, well, this is from their website. Second wave, there wasn't the first one. So that's denying that there was a first wave of coronavirus and denying that there's a second one. So this party is basically coronavirus skeptics, 5G, concerned about the health effects of 5G, maybe a bit of anti-vaxxer thrown in. Some things about if we all can take the right vitamins, then that will stop people getting ill, etc. This party grew out of the lockdown protests, apparently. I would summarise it as a sort of anti-scientific conspiracy theory party. Now, from what I see on Facebook, they could well be on course to win the election. I find it concerning just seeing so many people seeming to be drawn into this parallel world of some really unusual ideas, shall we say. And what's also concerning is the more outlandish someone's beliefs seem to become, the more impossible it is to discuss with them because they tend to flare up at you. But anyway, that's the Saving Scotland Party. Right, moving on. The Women's Equality Party, which is the most unnecessary party in the history of the universe. They exist in Scotland, and they will stand in the election, I think, in order to put pressure on the Scottish Parliament to become more feminist. Can you imagine the Scottish Parliament becoming more feminist? Neither can I. Anyway, but that's what they're all about. Right, the last one, number 21, we come to the Scottish Family Party. Well, they're neutral on a lot of the mainstream issues, particularly constitutional issues. They've taken a mild anti-lockdown stance. They're certainly going to be pushing for restrictions to be lifted at the earliest possible opportunity. They're socially conservative, again, pro-freedom of speech, anti-woke, but also pro-family, pro-marriage, which we think will solve a lot of problems in society, and also pro-life as a matter of fundamental moral principle. So this party will seek to inject new ideas into the Scottish Parliament to open up debate in the nation, to persuade more and more people of this perspective, and thereby grow in influence in successive parliaments. That's the long-term plan. Right, that's the end of the party guide. I know that's a lot to take in, but don't worry, you just need to remember one thing, and that is to vote for the Scottish Family Party. Okay, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this party guide, do share it, do subscribe to our channel, like this video. You can join the Scottish Family Party via a link below, or alternatively, make a donation. Thanks very much.